At 3 a.m., Draco's most ruthless billionaire caught a teenage waitress elbow-deep in freezing dishwater, tears streaming down her exhausted face. He assumed she was just another lazy dropout throwing her future away. But the dark secret hidden inside her worn-out backpack would completely shatter his entire world. Don't look away. Arcturus Strellan did not sleep. At 62, the founder and CEO of Strellan Capital possessed a net worth of $4 billion, a sprawling penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, and a mind that refused to shut down. He was a man built of cold calculations and rigid expectations. He had clawed his way up from the gritty streets of South Boston in the late 70s, building a real estate and private equity empire through sheer, uncompromising willpower. To Arcturus, the world was a simple binary. You were either a hard worker who seized opportunities, or you were a slacker who made excuses. There was no middle ground. His insomnia often drove him out of his penthouse and down the private elevator to the ground floor of his flagship property, the Grand Strellan Hotel. The hotel housed one of Draco's most exclusive restaurants, the Gilded Stag. By 3 a.m., the restaurant was a ghost town. The Michelin-starred chefs had long since wiped down their stations, the valet had parked the last Porsche, and the opulent dining room was plunged into a quiet, moody darkness. Arcturus liked the quiet. He would often walk through the pristine, stainless steel labyrinth of the commercial kitchen, just to clear his head. But on this particular Tuesday morning in late November, the kitchen was not empty. As Arcturus pushed through the heavy swinging doors, the rhythmic, wet sound of a heavy scrubbing brush echoed off the tile walls. The air smelled of sharp, industrial bleach, lemon soap, and old grease. There, at the far end of the cavernous room, stood a girl. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, swallowed whole by a white chef's apron that was at least 3 sizes too big for her. Her dark blonde hair was tied up in a messy, practical knot, loose strands clinging to her sweat-dampened forehead. She was hunched over the massive industrial double sink, her hands submerged in water that had long gone cold, aggressively scrubbing baked-on marrow from a heavy roasting pan. Arcturus recognized her uniform, the black slacks, the crisp white button-down beneath the apron, the burgundy bow tie resting on the stainless steel prep table nearby. She was front-of-house staff, a waitress, not a dishwasher. He stood in the shadows for a moment, simply watching. He noted the way she shivered, the deep, bruised purple circles under her eyes, and the aggressive, almost desperate energy with which she worked. She wasn't just cleaning, she was attacking the metal pan as if her life depended on it. The kitchen staff clocked out at 1 a.m. Arcturus's deep, gravelly voice broke the silence. The girl gasped, jumping so violently that the heavy roasting pan slipped from her soapy hands and slammed into the bottom of the steel sink with a deafening crash. Water splashed everywhere, soaking her shirt. She spun around, her eyes wide with sheer terror like a deer caught in headlights. When she recognized him, every employee at the Grand Strellan knew the face of the man who signed their paychecks. The blood completely drained from her face. "Mr. Strellan," she stammered, frantically wiping her wet, sudsy hands on her apron. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't hear you come in. I was just finishing up." Arcturus stepped fully into the harsh fluorescent light, his tailored cashmere overcoat a stark contrast to the grimy dish pit. He crossed his arms. "What is your name?" "Sophie, sir. Sophie Henderson." Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to stand up straight, meeting his gaze. "Well, Sophie Henderson," Arcturus said, his tone flat and uncompromising. "You are a waitress in my dining room. Why are you elbow-deep in dishwater at 3 a.m? Sophie swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the floor. "The night dishwasher, Hector. He wasn't feeling well. He has a bad cough, sir. I told him he should go home to his family. I didn't want the morning prep crew to come into a dirty kitchen, so I offered to finish his shift." Arcturus's eyes narrowed. He possessed an innate lie detector, honed over 40 years in boardrooms. She wasn't lying about Hector, but she wasn't telling the whole truth either. "You volunteered to stay 3 hours late, off the clock, scrubbing pots for fun?" A flush of embarrassment crept up Sophie's pale neck. "Hector agreed to give me the $50 from his shift pay if I finished up for him," she admitted softly. "I needed the extra cash. Please, Mr. Strelin, don't fire him. Or me. I'm doing a good job, I promise. The pans are spotless." Arcturus stepped closer, looking down at her hands. They were raw, the knuckles cracked and bleeding from the harsh chemicals and the winter air. "How old are you, Sophie?" 19, sir." 19? You should be in college, not scrubbing grease traps in the middle of the night for $50 under-the-table dollars. Arcturus's tone shifted from authoritative to distinctly judgmental. He had zero tolerance for squandered youth. "Let me guess. You decided school was too hard? Wanted to take a gap year that turned into a permanent vacation? You think waiting tables and cleaning dishes is a long-term career strategy?" The words landed like physical blows. Arcturus watched Sophie's jaw tighten. For a split second, the fear in her eyes vanished, replaced by a flash of profound, defensive anger. Her hands curled into tight fists at her sides, but she immediately wrestled the emotion back down, locking it away behind a mask of professional submission. "I dropped out of my university program 2 months ago, sir," Sophie said, her voice eerily calm and devoid of emotion. "You're right. I made my choices." Arcturus scoffed softly, shaking his head. It was the same old story. Kids today lacked the grit and the discipline to see anything through. "Go home, Sophie. Leave the rest of the pots. If I catch you doing another employee's job under the table again, I'll fire you both. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mr. Strelin." "Thank you." She didn't wait for him to leave. She untied the oversized apron, grabbed her worn-out, faded blue backpack from the floor, and hurried toward the staff exit, disappearing into the freezing Draco night. Arcturus stood alone in the kitchen. He had intended to feel justified, having delivered a necessary wake-up call to a misguided youth. Instead, as he looked at the sink, where the pots were indeed meticulously, perfectly clean, a strange, uncomfortable knot formed in his stomach. He couldn't shake the memory of the look in her eyes. It wasn't the look of a lazy dropout. It was the look of a trapped animal. A week passed. Arcturus Strelin buried himself in the quarterly reports of his various acquisitions. Aside from real estate, his most profitable venture was Strelin Health and Capital, a massive conglomerate that dealt in medical debt restructuring, pharmaceutical distribution, and healthcare real estate. It was a ruthless business, but highly lucrative. Yet, despite his busy schedule, the ghost of the girl in the dish pit haunted the edges of his mind. He found himself periodically checking the employee roster for the Gilded Stag. Sophie Henderson was working double shifts, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She was clocking 70 hours a week on her feet. On a busy Friday evening, Arcturus decided to dine at his own restaurant. He sat at his usual corner booth, sipping a glass of rare Bordeaux, ostensibly reviewing contracts, but subtly keeping an eye on the floor. The restaurant was operating at peak capacity. The room was a symphony of clinking crystal, low jazz, and the rich sense of seared wagyu and truffles. Sophie was managing an agonizingly busy section. Arcturus watched her balance 3 heavy plates of food, weave effortlessly through the crowded floor, and deliver them with a bright, customer service smile. But to Arcturus's trained eye, the cracks were showing. Her skin was a translucent shade of grey. She was moving too fast, running entirely on adrenaline and fumes. At 8:15 p.m., it happened. Sophie was taking an order at a large table of loud, demanding investment bankers. She nodded, writing something on her notepad. Then the pen slipped from her fingers. She stared blankly at the floor for a second. Suddenly, her eyes rolled back into her head, and her knees buckled. She collapsed hard, hitting the thick carpet with a dull thud. The tray she was holding clattered to the ground, shattering 2 expensive wine glasses. The dining room erupted into chaos. Patrons gasped, chairs scraped backward. Arcturus was out of his booth before his security detail could even react. "Move!" he barked at the stunned bankers, shoving past them. He dropped to his knees beside Sophie. She was completely unresponsive, her skin terrifyingly cold to the touch. "Get the manager! Call an ambulance!" Arcturus shouted. "No ambulance," a weak voice murmured. Sophie's eyes fluttered open. Panic instantly seized her features. She tried to scramble backward, her hands slipping on the spilled wine. "No, please. No ambulance. I can't afford an ambulance. I'm fine. I just stood up too fast." "You fainted, you foolish girl," Arcturus snapped, though his hands were surprisingly gentle as he helped her sit up. He looked at the restaurant manager, who had rushed over looking terrified. "Get her to the staff break room, now!" Arcturus and the manager helped Sophie up and guided her away from the staring wealthy patrons, through the kitchen doors, and into the quiet, fluorescent-lit break room. They eased her onto a small couch. "Get her some water and some bread," Arcturus ordered the manager. "Then leave us." As the manager rushed off, Sophie leaned forward, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Strelin. I'll clean up the glass. I'll pay for the broken glasses. Please don't fire me." "Be quiet, Sophie. You're not fired," Arcturus said, pacing the small room. He spotted her faded blue backpack sitting on a chair nearby. The zipper was broken, leaving the bag gaping open. Arcturus's eyes drifted to the contents. He expected to see what any other 19-year-old dropout might carry: makeup, magazines, maybe party flyers. Instead, protruding from the bag was a massive, heavily tabbed textbook: Advanced Pediatric Hematology and Oncology. Arcturus stopped pacing. He frowned, stepping closer to the bag. "What is this?" he asked, pointing to the book. Sophie looked up, her eyes widening in alarm. "Nothing. Just stuff I read." She tried to stand up to grab the bag, but a wave of dizziness hit her, forcing her back onto the couch. Ignoring polite boundaries, Arcturus reached into the open bag and pulled the textbook out. Beneath it was a thick, chaotic stack of papers held together by a rubber band. As he pulled the bundle free, a few papers fluttered to the linoleum floor. Arcturus bent down to pick them up. They were bills, but not standard credit card bills. They were medical invoices, dozens of them. The name on the invoices wasn't Sophie's. It read, "Patient, Leo Henderson. Age 7. Arcturus's chest tightened. He flipped through the papers. There were notices from Draco Memorial Hospital for chemotherapy treatments, bone marrow biopsies, and specialized isolation wards. The numbers at the bottom of the pages were staggering: 50,000, 80,000. One bill for a specialized targeted therapy treatment was over $120,000. Then Arcturus saw the final paper. It was a glaring red: Final Notice of Collection and Wage Garnishment. Arcturus recognized the letterhead immediately. It felt like a punch to the gut. The logo belonged to Apex Recovery Services. Apex Recovery was the premier medical debt collection agency in the Midwest, and it was a direct, wholly owned subsidiary of Strelin Health and Capital, His company. His eyes darted rapidly over the aggressive legal text. The letter threatened foreclosure on a small residential property in the South Side, Sophie's family home, evidently, unless a minimum payment of $10,000 was made within 14 days. The language of the letter was merciless, designed to terrify the recipient into compliance. Arcturus knew this because he had personally approved the aggressive collection tactics 3 years ago to boost his firm's quarterly margins. He slowly looked up from the papers, staring at the 19-year-old girl trembling on the couch. "Who is Leo?" Arcturus asked, his voice barely a whisper. All his previous arrogance had evaporated. Tears finally broke through Sophie's tough facade, spilling down her pale cheeks. She didn't have the energy to fight him anymore. She was broken. "He's my little brother," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He has acute myeloid leukemia. It's an aggressive strain. My parents, they died in a car crash 3 years ago. I'm his legal guardian. I was in a pre-med program at Northwestern on a full scholarship. I was going to be a pediatric oncologist, but then his insurance maxed out. They stopped covering the experimental treatments." She looked at the papers in Arcturus's hands, a bitter, exhausted smile touching her lips. "I couldn't go to class and work enough to keep him alive. So I dropped out. I work the morning shift at a diner. I wait tables here at night, and I do the dishes when I can. But it's not enough. That collection agency, Apex, they're going to take the house next week. If we lose the house, the state will take Leo away from me because I won't have a stable environment. If he goes into the foster system, he won't get his specialty treatments. He'll die, Mr. Strelin. My little brother is going to die." Arcturus stood frozen, the harsh fluorescent lights of the break room buzzing loudly in the silence. The papers in his hands suddenly felt like they were coated in lead. He was the monster hiding under her bed. The ruthless system that had forced a brilliant, aspiring doctor to scrub pots at 3 a.m. to pay off insurmountable debt was not some faceless entity. It was him. His policies. His demand for profit. He was literally paying her a minimum wage at his restaurant, only to have his debt collection agency squeeze every penny back out of her through legal terror. "I'm sorry," Sophie sobbed, burying her face in her hands again. "I know you hate people who make excuses. I'll pack my things. I'll leave." "No," Arcturus said. The word came out sharper, louder than he intended. Sophie flinched, looking up at him with red, swollen eyes. Arcturus looked down at the red logo of Apex Recovery. A cold, furious fire ignited in his chest, not at Sophie, but at himself, and at the empire he had built. "You aren't going anywhere, Sophie," Arcturus said, pulling his cell phone from his tailored pocket. "And neither is your brother." Arcturus Strelin did not simply make a phone call. He orchestrated an earthquake. Still standing in the harsh, flickering fluorescent light of the staff break room, Arcturus dialed the private cell phone of Gregory Harmon, the chief operating officer of Strelin Health and Capital. It was nearly 9 p.m. on a Friday. When Harmon answered, his voice was thick with the relaxed, expensive sounds of a country club dinner. "Arcturus, is everything all right? We're just wrapping up the 9th hole at—" "I want the complete Apex Recovery pediatric portfolio on my desk in 1 hour," Arcturus interrupted, his voice a lethal, icy whisper that immediately silenced the background noise on the other end of the line. Every file, every collection notice, every foreclosure threat issued to a family with a child in the oncology ward. Arcturus, that's thousands of files. The optics of pulling that data manually right now. If those files are not in my penthouse by 10 o'clock, Gregory, You will be publicly terminated before midnight, and I will personally see to it that you never work in the financial sector of this city again. Do I make myself clear?" Arcturus hung up before Harmon could stammer out a reply. He turned back to Sophie, who was sitting completely still, watching him with a mixture of awe and absolute terror. The billionaire extended his hand. "Get your bag, Sophie. We are leaving." "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling as she clutched the faded straps of her backpack. "To Draco Memorial Hospital. We are going to see your brother." 30 minutes later, Arcturus's armored black Maybach pulled up to the emergency bay of the hospital. The winter wind was howling off Lake Michigan, but inside the oncology ward, the air was stagnant, smelling of antiseptic and quiet despair. Sophie led Arcturus through the labyrinthine corridors, past rooms filled with the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the soft, exhausted sobbing of parents. They reached a small, cramped room at the end of the hall. Inside, a tiny, pale boy with no hair and deep, bruised shadows under his eyes was hooked up to a tangle of intravenous lines. 7-year-old Leo was asleep, his breathing shallow and labored. As Sophie rushed to her brother's bedside, gently brushing her fingers against his cheek, the door swung open. A man in a sharp, slightly too tight suit walked in, carrying a clipboard. It was David Croft, the hospital's premier financial liaison. His job was to extract payments from desperate families, and he was notoriously good at it. "Miss Henderson," Croft said, his tone dripping with a practiced, condescending faux sympathy. He didn't even glance at Arcturus, who was standing quietly in the shadows near the window. "I told you yesterday. Visiting hours do not suspend your financial obligations. Apex Recovery has officially initiated the garnishment. The hospital administration has reviewed your file, and without the $10,000 good faith payment, we cannot authorize Dr. Harrison to begin the next round of experimental, targeted therapy. We need to clear this bed by Monday." Sophie's shoulders hitched. She turned around, placing herself between Croft and her sleeping brother, a fierce, desperate protector. "I just need one more week, Mr. Croft. Please. I'm working 3 jobs. I can get a loan. Just let him have the treatment." "We are not a charity, Miss Henderson," Croft sighed, clicking his pen. "Choices have consequences. You chose to default. Now, I need you to sign these transfer papers. We are moving him to a state palliative facility tomorrow morning." "She isn't signing a damn thing." The voice rolled through the small hospital room like a crack of thunder. Croft jumped, turning to face the older man stepping out of the shadows. The hospital liaison opened his mouth to deliver a sharp rebuke about unauthorized visitors, but the words died in his throat. Anyone who handled money in Draco knew the face of Arcturus Strelin. "Mr. Strelin?" Croft stammered, his clipboard suddenly shaking in his grip. "Sir, I had no idea you were on the premises. The board of directors would have—" "Shut your mouth, David," Arcturus commanded, stepping into the light. He looked at the clipboard, then up at the liaison. The hard karma Arcturus was about to unleash was not just for the hospital. It was an indictment of his own empire. You are threatening to evict a dying 7-year-old child over a $10,000 delinquency? A debt manufactured by exorbitant inflated pharmaceutical pricing that my own company likely underwrote? "Sir, it's hospital policy, dictated by the collection agency," Croft squeaked, sweating profusely. "Apex Recovery mandates. I own Apex Recovery," Arcturus roared, the sheer volume of his voice making the IV bags tremble. "I built it, and as of 10 minutes ago, I am dismantling it. You will authorize Dr. Harrison to begin the experimental targeted therapy immediately. You will place Leo Henderson in the VIP pediatric suite on the top floor. You will bill every single cent of his medical care, past, present, and future, directly to the Strellan Private Trust. And if I ever hear that you have spoken to this young woman with that tone of voice again, I will buy this hospital and turn your office into a janitorial closet." Croft was pale as a sheet. "Yes, Mr. Strellan. Right away. I'll get Dr. Harrison immediately." He practically ran out of the room, tripping over his own feet in his haste to escape the billionaire's wrath. Arcturus turned back to Sophie. She was weeping, not out of fear, but out of a profound, shattering relief. The crushing weight of the world, a burden she had carried alone for 3 agonizing years, had just been lifted off her shoulders in a matter of seconds. "He's going to live, Sophie," Arcturus said softly, the ruthless titan of industry, suddenly sounding remarkably like a father. "Your brother is going to live, and you are going back to school." The transformation of Arcturus Strellan was neither quiet nor polite. It was a hostile takeover of his own soul. By Monday morning, the financial district of Draco was reeling from a seismic shock. Arcturus had summoned the executive board of Strellan Health and Capital. In a brutal 3-hour meeting, he systematically fired Gregory Harmon and the entire executive suite of Apex Recovery. The hard karma was swift and absolute. The men who had built their summer homes on the backs of medical debt were stripped of their severance packages, their golden parachutes voided due to newly initiated ethical compliance audits Arcturus had his lawyers draft overnight. But Arcturus didn't stop there. He didn't just shut down the collection agency. He inverted it. He liquidated a massive portion of his private equity holdings, nearly $800 million, and established the Strellan Pediatric Foundation. He repurposed the Apex Recovery offices, firing the aggressive debt collectors and hiring hundreds of patient advocates, social workers, and legal aids. Their new mission was entirely philanthropic, to audit, challenge, and pay off the pediatric medical debt of families across the Midwest. Meanwhile, inside the sunlit, state-of-the-art VIP suite at Draco Memorial, a different kind of rebirth was taking place. Leo's body responded miraculously to the experimental targeted therapy. Unburdened by the stress of impending homelessness and terrifying collection calls, the little boy began to fight back. The color returned to his cheeks. He started eating. Within 3 months, his aggressive leukemia was officially in remission. For Sophie, the vindication was absolute. Arcturus refused to let her step foot in the Gilded Stag or the diner ever again. Instead, he personally marched into the admissions office at Northwestern University. He didn't just pay her back tuition. He endowed a new scholarship program for medical students affected by family trauma, ensuring she would never have to worry about a textbook or a rent check again. 2 years later, the heavy, oppressive darkness of that 3 a.m. shift in the dish pit felt like a lifetime ago. It was a crisp, bright May morning. Arcturus Strellan sat in the front row of the Northwestern University commencement ceremony. He looked older, his hair a little grayer, but the harsh, rigid lines of his face had softened. The ruthless billionaire who once viewed the world as a binary of winners and losers had found his own redemption in the most unexpected place. On the stage, a young woman walked to the podium. She was no longer swallowed by an oversized, grease-stained apron. Sophie Henderson wore a crisp black graduation gown, her dark blonde hair falling neatly over her shoulders. She radiated a quiet, unshakable power, the aura of an underestimated protagonist who had walked through the fire and emerged as steel. As she received her pre-med diploma, graduating at the top of her class, she looked out into the crowd. Her eyes found a young, healthy 9-year-old boy cheering wildly from the front row. Beside Leo sat Arcturus, clapping with genuine, profound pride. Sophie had been accepted into the most prestigious pediatric oncology residency program in the country. She was no longer just a survivor of the system. She was preparing to dismantle it from the inside out. After the ceremony, as the crowds milled about the manicured lawns of the university, Sophie walked straight up to Arcturus. She didn't offer a handshake. She threw her arms around the billionaire, hugging him tightly. Arcturus, a man who had spent 40 years avoiding emotional attachments, hugged her back just as fiercely. "I'm ready for the next phase," Sophie said, pulling back and looking him in the eye. She had recently been named the youngest board member of the Strelin Pediatric Foundation. "We have a lot of families left to help." Arcturus smiled, a genuine, warm expression that his former corporate rivals would have never recognized. "We're just getting started, Dr. Henderson. The world doesn't know what's coming." The billionaire and the waitress had both been reborn in the ashes of a broken system, proving that sometimes the most profitable investment a person can make has absolutely nothing to do with money. Did this story of unexpected redemption and the ultimate plot twist leave you speechless? Sometimes the hardest karma comes from the very systems we build, but true rebirth is always possible when we choose humanity over profit. If Sophie and Arcturus's journey moved you, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible, real-life dramas. Leave a comment below with your thoughts.